If your character starts with a stat block, you're already doing it wrong. Because that's not a person, that's just math. A character sheet filled out in order is basically just empty calories. You don't need a build, you need a backstory. Not just any backstory, one that bleeds, that belongs, that matters. And that story starts with your world. Segment 1, character creation isn't step 1, it is the game. You ever wonder how we broke character creation in tabletop role-playing games? I think a big part of it comes from video games, especially MMOs and RPGs. Somewhere along the line, we inherited the idea that making a character means picking aesthetics and assigning numbers, then jumping straight into combat. It's kind of like a job interview. And that's led us down a weird rabbit hole. Now, there are basically 3 kinds of players at the table. Type 1, the design junkie. They'll spend 2 hours adjusting the angle of their eyebrow. They'll sculpt a cheekbone, and they'll debate skin tone, tweak the bridge of the nose. All for a game where they're mostly going to be staring at the character's back and watching them cast fireballs in first-person view. Do they ever see that perfect face? Not really. Do they care? Absolutely not. They just keep going. Which brings us to type 2, the stat maxer. They're playing a glowing green pig person with wheels for feet if it gets them the best bonuses. Race, culture, story, doesn't matter. Can I stack dex and intelligence? Cool, that's my character. And then there's type 3, the terrifying fusion of both. They min-max their stats and their jawline. You'll have them say things like, I spent 4 hours building this guy, and they mean it. They probably really just need a hug and maybe a second monitor. But here's the problem with all 3. They build the character once, and then it's over. Stats are set, gear is picked, spells are locked, and then they wait for the real game to start. But they missed it. Character creation is the game. Let me say that again. Character creation is the game. Take yourself. Could you give me all that makes you tick in 1, maybe 2 short paragraphs, including your family history? This creation is where story begins. It's where meaning takes shape. It's where the players decide whether they're tourists or people who actually belong in your world. Because my list over here and there, and each one of these is a story unto itself with different things driving every life choice. And so if you and your players get this part right, the campaign doesn't just start strong. It never lets go. This is where the magic is. And you kill the magic the second you say,
okay, what class do you want to be?
No, stop, back up, because the question doesn't belong yet. Before you ask what they do, you have to really ask, where are they from? What shaped them? What hurt them? Why do they still get up in the morning? And finally, who are they? If you can't answer those, you don't really have a character. You have a cardboard cutout with some really cool, nice dice rolls. Segment 2. You build the world before you build the character. Players hear this. Your DM's world is not a blank page. And DMs, this one's for you. Your world needs structure before anyone makes anything. Not rules, not balance, but true scars, a tone, gravity, a divine war that left the sky torn open, a desert city drowning in sand and sin, a kingdom still haunted by the tyrant's last wish. Your characters don't and can't really exist outside this. They're not astronauts, they're not tourists. They're stories that are woven into the world wound. And that world wound, that's what makes characters real. It gives you permission to hurt, to hope, to heal. Because now you're not just playing D&D or any other tabletop role-playing game. This isn't just backstory, it's origin story. We're not just making characters, we're creating legends that could echo across thousands of years of lore. Now we're not just rolling dice, now we're making myth. Segment 3. Destiny doesn't ask permission. The way we do backstories is broken. And no one really wants to admit it. Here's the truth. Most DMs run character creation like a creative writing assignment. They toss the players a sheet of paper and say,
Tell me your greatest hopes, your greatest fears, and what drives you.
It sounds deep, it sounds thoughtful, but the reality is it's kind of hollow because none of it's grounded in the world they're about to live in. How are you supposed to give a meaningful answer about your dreams when you don't know the cost of dreaming in this world? How do you describe fears when no one's told you what to be afraid of? Why would your backstory have any weight if you don't know what the world does to people like you? Most players just pull from tropes. Dead family, lost kingdom, ancient prophecy tattooed across their back. And most DMs accept it. They nod and smile and say, great, I'll work that in. But they don't. They can't because none of it connects. And even worse, these backstories are sold like therapy. Give me a hope, give me a fear, tell me what your characters want. But none of those things matter if they weren't shaped by the world. If you weren't scarred by its history or broken by its rules, you're not building a character. You're daydreaming in a void. So yeah, the system is broken. The questions are backwards and the process is upside down. The story doesn't start with the character. It starts with the world. And until that's created, every backstory is just noise. Let's shift the way it's done. Let's give the madness some teeth because this isn't just about one character or one player or even one campaign. This changes how we see the game itself. It makes the world matter more than any one backstory. It makes every choice echo. Dungeons and Dragons was never supposed to be about winning. It was about escaping, becoming, living inside something much bigger than yourself. And when you start creating like this, that world, your world, starts to feel real. And that's when it stops being an idea and starts really being alive. Segment 4, forging a character. You don't pick your race, you roll it. And that single change, it rewrites everything you think about character creation. I know, it sounds cruel at first. It's a little unfair, maybe even wrong. Good. Because life doesn't ask you what you want to be either. You don't get to say, I want to be an elf with a katana and a tragic backstory. I didn't get that. You don't start with a style point and a soft focus origin scene. You start with chance, with blood, with a name you didn't choose. So roll a 1d100, weighted by your world's actual population. And that world speaks. You're a dwarf, you're a halfling. You're a half-orc branded before you even opened your eyes. You're a human in a kingdom where the humans are second-class citizens, or worse, they're cautionary tales. And now everything changes. The game isn't something you're trying to beat anymore. It's something you're born into. You're not choosing power, you're learning how to survive. That role isn't just a stat, it's a past, a culture, a wound. Your hands are calloused. Your spine aches from childhood labor. Your people carry songs older than the empire, but no one sings them aloud anymore. You don't get to be the idolized version of yourself. You get to be real, and that's better. Now roll for subrace. This isn't just a detail, it's the blood in your veins and the soil under your feet. It tells us where you come from, what kind of people raised you, and what legacy you carry without even realizing it. It narrows your lineage, shapes your culture, locks in the terrain that molded your body and your beliefs. Mountain dwarf or hill dwarf, wild elf or gray elf. These aren't just stat tweaks. They're the bones of your backstory. Who were your ancestors? What did they value? What did they survive? Your subrace isn't an option, it's a declaration. So roll, and we'll find out what world carved you. Based on your race and your subrace, what is your name? Not the kind that looks cool on that character sheet. I mean your name. The one your grandmother whispered in prayer. The one your clan sings with pride or spits out like a curse. The one your enemies can't pronounce right, but they fear it anyways. It's a name with roots, with history, with scars. It carries the dust of your homeland, the blood of your people, and the expectations of the dead who came before you. This isn't just a tag, it's a challenge, a promise, a legacy. So, what is your name? Because once you speak it, the story begins. Now ask, where am I born? Not where you're from. Where is the place that is already breathing long before you took your first breath? Because it exists whether you were born or not, whether anyone ever tells a story about it or not. It doesn't need you. The wind still howls, the bells still ring at the wrong hour. The river still floods the lower fields every spring like it always has. A village built in the shadow of a leaning tower that no one really remembers building. A long road that passes through a town where every house has the same number. A fishing port where the gulls stopped coming years ago, and no one will say why. This place has its own weight, its own silence, its own rhythm, and you're not part of yet. That's the kind of world that feels real, not because it reacts to you, but because it doesn't. You don't need to matter in the place. The place needs to matter on its own. And that's where the world begins for your character. Segment 5. You don't choose your family either. Roll again, because no one chooses their parents. You didn't get a say in who held you first, or what kind of house you came home to, if there was a house. You don't decide if your family was noble or nameless, if your sister died in the fire. Wait, there was a fire? That's how it begins, with a roll, not with a sentence, not with a trope. That scar that unspools itself whether you want it to or not. You don't choose if your father came home from the war, or if he came back wrong, or if he never came back at all. Because characters don't start with a class. It starts with trauma and a memory, with something lost or something you're terrified to lose. So we roll again, birth order. Were you the first? The afterthought? The one who lived because your older brother didn't? Wealth level. Were there coins under the floorboards or rats in the cupboards? Your parents' job. Did they swing hammers, speak sermons, mend wounds, or cause them? Your siblings. How many? Which ones are still alive? Which ones remember your name? We can shape the rest with imagination or AI prompts if you want to kickstart. But it has to hurt. It has to mean something because nothing real comes without weight. Your character needs 4 anchors. Your parents, whether present, distant, or dead. Social status, because power, or lack thereof, shapes everything. Your home, not your country, not your kingdom, a place, a room, a smell, a sound. And siblings, even if the only thing they left was silence. Without those, you're not a character. You're a ghost with a sword. And ghosts, they don't role play very well. They just wander from room to room, waiting for initiative to be rolled. And here's where this becomes more than just philosophy. At the end of this video, we're going to walk you through building a character, step by brutal step, from scratch, using everything we've covered and what we will cover. We're going to bring in the world wound, the local wound, and a few smart AI prompts to help pull it all together. I'll drop a prompt list and a full downloadable PDF to help you walk through that path. Not a build, a backstory, one that hurts and matters. Segment 6, tie your family to the wound. Here's the part that most people skip. The part most guides don't even ask. The question that makes backstories real. How did the wound touch your family? Because it did. It has to. And it always does. No one gets out clean. You want a world-shaking event? Then let it shake the things you love. Let it crack the foundation your character was built on. Because otherwise, it's not a world wound. It's just a backstory wallpaper. Your father lost his mind when the gods stopped answering. He used to whisper prayers before every meal. Now he just stares at his hands like they don't belong to him. Your village, gone, turned to salt and wind after the ritual failed. People still talk about it whenever the air tastes like copper. Your mother is one of the ash touched now. She hums songs in languages no one taught her, and her eyes glow in the dark and her hands twitch when she sleeps. This is the cost of playing in a world that means something. This is what it's like when your story is rooted in the soil of the wound poisoned. This is what it means when we say the world matters. Your characters can't exist without it. And if they do, if you're building them outside that shared history, you're building a tourist and not a person. You're writing a solo novel in a group story. Stop building characters in a vacuum. That vacuum kills roleplay because a character with no roots, no scars, and no ties to the wound, they're not really alive. They're a custom skin wrapped around a stat block. You don't pull the story forward, and they don't pull other players in. They just float, untouched, unchallenged, aesthetic without consequences. Yeah, sure, they might get a clever one-liner in combat. They might have a cool weapon or a mysterious past that never really gets unpacked. But that's not role-playing. That's performance. That's cosplay with dice. Roleplay happens when the past crashes into the present. When your scar speaks louder than your stats. When your fears feel really earned. When the world doesn't just react to you, it remembers you. But for that to happen, you need friction. You need grief. You need family members who paid the price before you ever picked up a sword or even took your first breath. You need the world to hurt before the first session even begins. Because if it didn't hurt you, why would it change you? Without that, you don't have role play. You just have people pretending to be heroes in a world that never asked them to be. And no one will ever remember the kind of hero who was never really needed. Segment 7. Now roll for potential, not your final stats. We don't roll stats to get numbers. We roll to see where the world puts you. Not how strong, smart, or charming you are, but where you landed when life passed out its blessings and its beatings. Here's how it works. For each stat, strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, charisma, you roll D100. That's it, 1 die, 1% score. But we don't treat it like a normal stat. We treat it like a ranking. This system isn't about what you can do, not yet. It's about where you started, how you've been measured, overlooked, relied on, punished. The world shaped you inside that percentile. And every skill, every flaw, every instinct you have was born from living with that number. You don't roll for stats. You roll for a place in the world. And everything else grows out of that. Maybe you're in the top 20%. You're exceptional. You were born different. People notice. Maybe you were feared. Maybe you were praised. Either way, expectations have always followed you. Kind of like a shadow. Maybe you're in the middle 50%. You're average. Not average in a bland way, average in a real way. You had to work for everything. Sometimes you shine, sometimes you struggle. You don't define yourself by your gifts, but by what you do when the moment matters. Maybe you're in the lower 20%. You've always been a little behind. You had to make do with less. Maybe you got a limp no one sees, a stutter no one hears, or a fear that's shaped every choice you've made. But that's not weakness, that's weight. And that weight builds muscle. Bottom 10%, maybe you were born broken. But fate is cruel and clever because it often throws you a gift somewhere else. A different stat goes up. Maybe you are not as strong, but you're sharp. Maybe you're frail, but people follow you anyway. That tension, that contradiction, that's where great characters live. Because this isn't about balance. Life isn't balanced. You weren't born with a character sheet. You were born with conditions, biases, grit, and maybe, if you're lucky, a sliver of hope. This just doesn't affect your build. It defines your worldview. It explains your mistakes. It shapes your empathy. You're not the strongest. Maybe you become a fighter anyway, because someone had to protect the others. You're not the smartest. Maybe you still chase knowledge because your mother died whispering something you just didn't understand. Or maybe you are brilliant, but stuck in a dying village where no one ever leaves. So you dream, and that dream hurts. That's a story. That's a person. That's why percentile stat matter more than flat numbers ever could. It's not about who you are. It's about what you do with what you're given. And that's a character. Segment 8. Choose your class based on who you are. Now you choose your class, but not because the numbers said so. Not because it gives you the most attacks per round or access to the best spells. You choose your class based on who you are. The path your life has carved, the things you've seen, the burdens you carry, the potential you might have had or don't have. You've seen miracles. Maybe not glowing divine kind. Maybe the quiet kind. Your brother's waking up after 3 days of fever. Your mother surviving childbirth in a cursed village. You believe in the light because you have to. So you reach for faith and you decide you need to become a cleric. You were raised by violence. You didn't pick up the sword because you thought it would be fun. You picked it up because it was survival. You're not a fighter because you're brave. You're a fighter because you've been afraid for so long and that fear has become a weapon. You grew up serving nobles, scrubbing their floors of the grand libraries. You never had the opportunity to learn to read, so you've listened, you've memorized. You stole moments of knowledge in the quiet. Now, you're a magic user. Not because of power, but because you're so hungry to understand. And maybe, later on, you found out you don't qualify. Your stats aren't high enough. Your wisdom's too low. You didn't meet the gatekeeper's standard. So what? It's not failure. That's story. You're not a paladin. You're someone who wanted to be one and you just couldn't. But you still wear the armor, you still fight with honor, and you still pray, even when no one's really listening. You're a bard. You can't carry a tune, but you tell stories because no one else will remember them. You're a cleric who never heard the gods speak, but you serve anyways. Because if they're silent, then someone has to hear their voice. That tension between what you wanted and what you got, that's not a design flaw. That's a character. That's the marrow of roleplay. That's when it bleeds into something true, not in the class choice, but in the meaning behind it. Because you didn't earn this identity by picking from a menu. You earned it by living a life inside a fictitious, made-up world. And now that world will respond. Segment 9. Why this class? So you've chosen your class. But this isn't a game mechanic anymore. It's not a pick from a drop-down menu. It's not what plays well with the other party members. Or what sounds cool. Or because you don't know what everyone else is or you shouldn't. This is a revelation, a reflection of everything that came before. Look at what you've already built. Where you were born. What your family taught you or failed to teach you. What you struggle with. What wounded you? What your world demands of you. This class is not something you choose. It's something you become. So now you answer one simple, and it's a powerful question. Why this path? Why did you become a fighter? Was it because your older brother was taken to war and never came back? Or because the village only respected strength and you were tired of being overlooked? Why are you a magic user? Because you saw something in an old book that no one else believes was real? Because magic was the one thing your noble family couldn't control? Why a cleric? Because you needed answers? And something whispered back? Or maybe you didn't even want this class. Maybe it was your only choice. Maybe it was forced on you. Maybe it was survival. This is where you write the chapter between the childhood and the character sheet. This is the moment they become what they are now. Was it a vow, a mistake, a miracle? And was it earned, inherited, stolen? You don't just say, I'm a ranger. You tell me why the forest is the only place that feels like home. You don't just write, thief. You show me the owl you swore you'd never return to, the one where your best friend died in your place. Most people get this wrong. Your class isn't a job. It's circumstances and it's consequences. A choice made long ago, a truth you're still trying to live with. So before you roll those final stats, before you find out what you're capable of, write this moment, the day your character became who they are, because that's the soul of the game. And everything else, they're just stats. Segment 10. What are you really made of? You've chosen your path. You've told the story of how you got here. But now comes the test, not of desire, but of reality. Because life doesn't always give you what you want. Sometimes it gives you just enough to fail, to scrape by, to suffer through, or to surprise everyone. This roll, this isn't the start of your build. This is the world answering back. Okay, you chose this life. Let's see what it costs. You already know where your stats might land based on the percentiles. But now, we're going to lock them in. And here's how. Exceptional, top 20%. You roll a 1d4 plus 14. Average, middle, 50%. You do the same thing. You roll a 1d4, but you add it to 10. Struggling, which is your lower 20%, you do a 1d4 and you add it to 6. Broken, your bottom 10%. A whisper of mercy from fate. Add 10% to another stat. This isn't about fairness, this is about weight. Did you roll well enough to live the life you imagined? Maybe yes, maybe no. Maybe you dreamed of being a druid, but your wisdom falls short. Now you're just some noble guardian of nature. Or maybe you're a dirt-covered farmer barely hanging on who talks to trees in his sleep. Maybe doesn't even know they're listening or mocking him. Maybe you wanted to be a paladin, but charisma and strength didn't answer the call. Now you're a sellsword with a holy symbol in his pocket and a memory of a vow you still believe in, even if the gods don't. This isn't a downgrade. This isn't a failure. This is depth. This is truth. Because what matters now isn't what you hope to be. It's how you carry what you are. So roll your stats. Let the numbers land. And whatever they say, make it matter. Because when your DM looks at this character that you've just made, they shouldn't ever see stats on a page. They should see a reckoning, a fire forged by choice and tempered by fate. Segment 11. Now write it down, but don't you dare forget the story. You've done the hard work. You told the truth about your character, where they came from, why they chose this path, and what the world gave them in return. Now finally, we get to fill in the sheet. We get to buy or steal or do whatever we want with gear. We need to find or figure out our skills. We need to figure out and learn our spells. These are numbers. And these are the easy parts. And they all create that awesome skeleton. But don't confuse the skeleton for the soul, because all that paper, all those boxes and stat lines, and they mean nothing, literally nothing, without the story behind them. Your dexterity isn't just a +2 bonus. It's the reflex you honed slipping out of the window when you were too scared to face your father. Your intelligence being just a 14. It's a decade of stolen moments reading forbidden books by candlelight while your sister slept. Your wisdom isn't just a stat. It is every gut feeling you trusted when everybody else thought you were crazy. But you were right. So yes, write it down. Build that body, but never ever forget the life inside of it. Your character is more than a class. It's more than a race or an ability or a stat block. They are the person forged in grief, hope, fear, and fire. And when your DM sees this sheet, they should see a living thread they want to weave into the world. And when you sit down to play, you won't just play a character. You'll become a memory in the story that no one ever forgets. Because in this world, at this table, you should never bring a build. Every character now should be able to answer these questions easily. They should be memorized. They should be the mantra of who they are. The first one is origin, where they came from. 2 is desire. What do they want? What is their purpose? What is their intent? 3, fear. What threatens them or keeps them awake at night? 4, your connection. What are they tied to? Who, what, when, where, how? Something needs to connect them. 5, your impact. How does this character impact the world? Or impact something? And 6, change. How is your character evolving over time? Segment 12. Let's build a character. Before we dive in, I want to introduce someone important. Allie, my incredible wife, chaos co-pilot, and partner in all things weird. She is going to be our brave volunteer for this character creation run, our guinea pig, our hero. We're going to walk you through the full process together. I'll be jumping between real dice rolls and AI-generated storytelling, tools to show you how it flows. This is fun. This is alive. And we're doing it inside the world wound we built back in episode 1. If you haven't seen that, go watch it. Or just know this world is broken and bleeding. And everything we build here has to live inside that. I've included a few PDFs to help guide you through our own process. But here's the most important thing to remember. Character creation should never, ever, ever be a group project. Not at first. This is something that should happen between one player and the DM. Quiet, focused, intentional. Because in real life, if you had an intelligence of 6, you wouldn't introduce yourself and say, "Hi, I'm Kurt, and I'm kind of dumb." You'd just be. You'd exist in the world, and people would learn who you are by how you move through it. And that's how it should be with your game, too. Stats have to be private. Backstories are personal, and characters are discovered, not announced. So sit down, just the two of you. Let the dice fall, let the story form, and let's make someone real. We sat down, and our initial roll is for race. This is based on my world, taking into account my social-political world wound. Then she rolls for subrace. I'm only dealing with 2 subraces of gnomes, rock gnomes and forest gnomes. The reason I'm not having any deep gnomes in my world is the mechanics of dark vision. I don't like it. Anyways, with race and subrace complete, she comes up with her name. Poppy Slyfox. We then transition to our world wound. We need to figure out how we fit into the world. For us, using the blood census, which is about putting a social class mark on the right forearm that tells everyone who you are and where they sit in society. It's kind of like a giant world caste system. After figuring out her name and that she is one step above the lowest caste, which in the gnomes is cracked, we shift a place. Again, this is not your home. It's a place that exists with or without you. we ask 3 questions. 1, what is the place called? 2, the physical location. 3, some strange, weird fact about it. Allie came up with a forest called Moss Vault Thicket, and the forest gnome town called Underleaf Hollow, which has a river that runs next to it that no one knows its depth. We then plug this into AI and it gives us back a compelling backstory for the town. This, with all the backstory information that we're going through right now, will be available in the description. Next, we work on Poppy's mother and father, figuring out occupation, their fate, their family wealth, their names. After this, we figure out the siblings. And because forest gnomes usually only have 1 to 2 children, Poppy being a single child is no surprise. Again, we pump this information into AI and get another compelling story about the world right before Poppy was born, how her father is exiled, and how he was a priest, and how Poppy is from a long line of criminals based on her cracked glyph. So we find ourselves rolling for stats, and surprising, Poppy is kind of a badass. We find out she has exceptional strength, wisdom, and dexterity. She's average in constitution and charisma, but she struggles with her low intelligence. Based on what she could be, she opts for a cleric thief. And based on her race, her town, her family, and finally her abilities, we get a pretty good, solid introduction into Poppy's world. Then we finalize the numbers with a strength being of 17, an intelligence of 9, a wisdom of 15, a dexterity of 18, a constitution of 14, and a charisma of 14. It all kind of fits. We do a little racial adjustment for forest gnomes, and we are done. We have our character. Segment 13, the thread that binds it all. You made it. You didn't just build a character. You breathed life into someone who belongs in your broken world. They weren't chosen from a list. They were shaped by trauma, by family, by fate. They didn't appear. They thrived with scars and stories in tow. This wasn't about builds. This was about becoming, because the best characters don't just live in the world. They reflect it. They respond to it. They resist it. Now that we've made someone real, we're going to weave them into everything. Because stories aren't made from isolated parts. They're made from things that overlap. In the next episode, Venn diagrams will save your story. We'll show you how to link the world wound, the local wound, and the character wound into a single unstoppable narrative where backstories aren't side notes or side quests or things, they're pressure points on your world. And the DM doesn't just prep quests, they'll pull on strings that really exist in your player characters' lives. So if you want your campaign to move people, if you want your players to lose themselves in the story, then don't miss what's next. Resources and worksheets are in the description. Echoes linger longer than stats. This is Fluffy Demon D&D, where stories bleed and magic costs something. One strike carved into history, one scar remembered by firelight, and one spell cast with trembling hands and unwavering will. If this spoke to you, carry it forward. Like, share, subscribe. Let's rebuild wonder one legend at a time.